Hello and welcome to WGTC Radio, the official podcast of entertainment website We Got This Covered. I'm Jonathan Lack.
And I'm Sean Chapman.
And we didn't know what music to play this week, because this week's topic is Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, Parts 1 and 2, the DC Animated Universe film adaptation of Batman, The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller.
Yes, that was very, the introduction to that topic.
Yeah, well anyway, we'll get into that later. We're going to talk about these movies. Part 2 just came out, so it seems like a good time to talk about these. They're pretty relevant to our audience, we think. Everyone likes Batman. Lots of people like The Dark Knight Returns. We may not be part of those people.
Yeah.
We'll talk about all that. Though.
Yeah. We'll
but
get into that.
The music in that movie is not notable enough to use on our podcast.
Yeah. And then also, we don't have the soundtracks to those movies.
Yeah, we don't have the soundtracks to those movies. I have a lot of Batman music, but none of the other Batman music really seemed to fit this Batman music. So we played the opening song to Persona 4 The Golden, the PS Vita remake of Persona 4. The awesome JRPG that you should be playing if you haven't.
Yes, and hopefully you've already played it, because it's one of my favorite games of all time.
And one of mine,
God
too.
knows we've talked about it enough on this podcast, and I get a feeling we're about to talk about it some more.
Well, I just want to mention some things. Last week I mentioned that I had finally started to play it. I purchased a PS Vita on Sean's recommendation because he had played Persona 4 on the PS2, basically, and when the original version. And it had just come out with its remake, Persona 4 Golden, for the PlayStation Vita. And I'd wanted to kind of get a Vita for some other reasons anyway. And it's like, well, this game seems like as good a reason as any to buy a system. And I've been digging the hell out of it. I'm 20 hours in. It's one of the best games I've ever played.
Yeah.
And that's only from 20 hours. So
yeah, and the perspective of the length of Persona 4, that's like a fourth, maybe, into the way of the game. So...
And you can tell that when you're playing it. Like,
yeah,
at 20 hours, you feel like you've made a dent. Like that's the point where you finally feel like you've done stuff, but not all the stuff by any stretch.
You will not do all the stuff.
No,
certainly not on your first playthrough.
But anyway, I was playing it, and Sean was looking over my shoulder a lot because he was very curious. So I was talking to him a lot about the things I'd seen, and a lot of our conversations went in the vein of, hey, Sean, didn't you love the part where XXXX? And Sean would say...
no, that wasn't in the original game. I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
So, Sean, you felt compelled to buy a Vita.
Yes, I felt very compelled after just basically watching you play it for like 10 minutes. I was like, oh, fuck. I'm going to have to spend a lot of money now. And so I spent a lot of money, and I got myself a PS Vita. I had some money saved up, and I was like, fuck it. It's been a really long time since I bought something new that's really expensive. So I bought a PS Vita, I got Persona 4 The Golden. I also got it because there are the other Persona games that I haven't played. The earlier ones have PSP remakes that you can get on that system. That's kind of the only real way to play those games for me. So I was like, there are a lot. Since I never had a PSP, there's a huge backlog of those games too. So I was like, fuck, I'm going to get the PS Vita. Obviously, the first game I got for it was also Persona 4 The Golden. And god damn it, that game is really good. We're kind of in this era where a lot of companies are coming out with HD remakes. There's a whole bunch of those Sony collections that they do for here's all the old Jak and Daxter games, but they're just like, we're going to put it out on the PS3, but it's just like up-res textures. We've made it widescreen, and that's basically it.
And that's good in a lot of cases.
Yeah, that's cool, because for a lot of people, particularly since the PS3 doesn't have its PS2 backwards compatibility,
right?
You get some access to a lot of those games, and they're really good deals. It's like they did that with God of War, they did that with Metal Gear Solid, they did that with Silent Hill. They've done that with a whole bunch of different franchises, and that's cool that they did these HD remakes and they put it out there. But Atlus went above and beyond, and Atlus has gone above and beyond in all of these portable remakes they have for all their games, and that they don't just put out the same game with some fancy new graphics. They put out a new goddamn game. Because there is so much that is new in that game that I'm just running into constantly, and
You had a great story just about seeing crows on the street.
Yeah, no, that there's just this dumb little detail that when you're walking around the shopping district, they're just crows that are sitting on the street, and then when you walk by them, they fly away. That wasn't in the original game. This is one little detail that makes that little, walk that you take about 1,000,000 times in that game feel a little more alive. And the game's just full of little details like that. And
then big details, too.
Huge, whole new characters, just whole new, long conversations. They've really updated the user interface and made it much more usable. Persona fusing is great now because you don't have to just like select on a whole bunch of just random personas in your that you have and like just see like what will like end up coming out of the fusion. Instead, they have a whole list of the personas you can get out of fusion and just select that way. Makes so much more sense, and it's a lot less busy work. You can just select which skills personas get instead of just having to sort of roll the dice over and over again to like try to get the right mix that you want to get the persona you want out of it. They made that game really awesome, and you know, if you've already played Persona 4 and you really like Persona 4, which I imagine you would have, this is a version, like, play the game again with Persona 4 The Golden, because it is a whole new version of the game as far as I'm concerned. There's so much more stuff in there that a fan of Persona should experience.
And, you know, as someone who came into it with this version, I feel like this was the perfect time to come into Persona, because it's so easy to just pick up the Vita and play it. It's very, very optimized for portable play in that way. It's a great game for this style of portable play the Vita offers. And if you were, you know, if you're the kind of person who was thinking about getting a Vita, like you were interested in that system, I would definitely recommend it on the strength of Persona 4 alone.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah. Like, that game is worth buying that system for, as far as I'm concerned.
And then there's so much other great stuff. I mean, I also have to say about PlayStation Plus, the cool like PlayStation subscription service you can get. I just got that because they have this deal going on now. If you buy a 12-month subscription, you get 15 months. And I have filled my Vita up with all these free games they gave out, and they're all like AAA titles, and it's nuts. And I'm excited to play a lot of those, too, when I'm done with Persona. But I think what we're going to do, because this is a slow time of the year for podcast topics, not a lot going on, you know, Sean and I are both playing Persona 4 Golden. We'll probably be done with it in a couple weeks, and we're definitely going to make that a topic on an upcoming episode. And I think we'll offer a full review of the Vita as a system at that time, too.
Yeah,
maybe talk about
that sounds good.
Yeah, and talk about the Vita sort of being, you know, 1 year out from its launch. But I think there's a lot to talk about there, but we'll let that be its own episode soon. Just wanted to mention it one more time, because that's kind of what's on our minds.
Yeah. And I just want to say also, one of the great things about Persona 4 The Golden is that if you're someone who doesn't like to put up with a lot of JRPG bullshit, which I am that kind of person, like that, like little design choices. And Persona 4 was a huge, like the original Persona 4 was a huge step in the right direction of having like a better user interface, about it being a lot more forgiving about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Persona 4 The Golden is completely modern. Like, it is totally to the standards in that kind of, like, usability and just, like, user-friendliness that most games you expect would have. And so that's kind of the coolest thing, that if you're... I think that's, like, sort of, like, lowers the barrier of entry that a lot of people are intimidated by, you know, having to, like, go through all these menus, having these really complex systems that are not properly explained. I think Persona 4 The Golden... it like explains all of that stuff and lays it out in the easiest, most simple way it possibly could. Yeah. And that's really cool. And it gives me a lot of faith for the future games in that genre, of that, you know, to look at this and be like, we don't have to be so mired in our old-fashioned game design ideas that we can't, like, sort of modernize it and make it much more user-friendly.
Yeah. I completely agree. And, you know, I think one of the most interesting things is, you know, I'd heard Sean talk about this game, both to me and on the podcast, and it sounded so fucking complex and crazy.
Yeah.
And then when I sat down to play it, you know, I thought I would have to ask Sean a lot of questions about it. You thought I would have to ask you a lot of questions about it. I really have asked you almost nothing. We've really just, when we talk about the game, we just talk about the game.
Yeah.
And it's like, it lays out like, here's how you play it. And then you play it, and it works.
Yeah.
That's a nice feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
I have to say. So anyway, we will talk about that more at a later date. I think we'll just go into the main topic here. There's really nothing else going on. The only movie I've seen recently, you can read my review up on the site, is Stand Up Guys. It's awful. I wish Christopher Walken and Al Pacino could be in a good movie together, but it's not. They're just not. I do have to say, one of my proudest achievements as a critic happened this week, though.
No, what was that?
Well, let me tell you, Sean. All right, so Sean, you know the website Rotten Tomatoes?
Yes, I do.
All right, review aggregate, you know, critics who Rotten Tomatoes, you know, deems professional. They collect their reviews, they put little snippets up, and if you go to the main page for that movie, there's all the reviews listed. Like, there's a quote, and then you can read the full review.
Yeah.
Well, I've been on Rotten Tomatoes for, you know, about 8 or 9 months now, and I wrote a line in my Stand-Up Guys review that I will admit I wrote entirely because I wanted it on Rotten Tomatoes. I wanted it to be the pull quote because I think it would have been awesome to get this as a pull quote, and I have picture proof here that it was the pull quote, and I hope I can put it up with this podcast on We Got This Covered, because I love this screenshot. And it's my quote for stand-up guys that says, "I will continue to hold out hope for a good Pacino-Walken team-up in the future, but with writing this rote and unremarkable, Stand-Up Guys is just as flaccid as its main character's penis." I got the word penis on the main page of Rotten Tomatoes.
You should get a reward for that. Like, that should be, or some sort of, like, you should join some club. Because there has to be someone else in the world who has done that, too.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys should just start we got our penises on the front of Rotten Tomatoes. And just, like, make that club. And have, like, I don't know what you do, but...
Yeah.
It's just, like, I think that's an important accomplishment. It's a cultural achievement.
I agree, too. And it was not completely out of context. There is a large section of stand-up guys, and by large section I mean the entirety of the first act, that is all about Al Pacino's flaccid dick. So, or his characters. I'm sure Al Pacino in real life can get it up just fine.
So you're saying you didn't just pull that penis out of it, like, nowhere?
No, I did not pull that penis out of nowhere.
Okay, well, that's good.
Speaking of pulling penises out of nowhere...
Oh, okay, I don't know. What is this going to segue into? I don't even know.
I was just going to say Dark Knight Returns.
Oh, well... That's disappointing. I was hoping that would be like a good, like, appropriate segue for whatever the fuck you were going to talk about next, but...
No. I don't know, Al. I don't know what the appropriate segue could be for that.
That's why I was excited! And you disappointed me.
Alright, Sean, let's do some back history here.
Yeah.
What is The Dark Knight Returns?
That is a good question, because before we delve into the animated film, I think we need to talk about The Dark Knight Returns and its existence and its sort of like its place in comic history.
Yes.
Because The Dark Knight Returns is a very influential, very famous graphic novel written by Frank Miller and also drawn by Frank Miller that came out in the late 80s. This was like pre him doing Batman Year One. He got the job for Batman Year One basically because he did The Dark Knight Returns, and it is this sort of like alternate universe, like post-apocalyptic story of Batman, like Bruce Wayne as Batman. He's retired. He's not putting up with this bullshit anymore, and sort of the world has devolved. It's a very like Watchmen-ish, like alternate, like near future sort of scenario with the Cold War stuff going on. Superman's working for the government and all this stuff. And then one day, Batman's just like, fuck it, I want to be Batman again. So he beats Batman again. He like beats up a bunch of dudes, and he's Batman in a very Frank Miller way. And sort of it really revitalized a lot of interest in the Batman character. It sort of brought back a very gritty version of Batman that's, still kind of the very popular interpretation of that character, although Frank Miller certainly takes that to the extreme.
Yeah, and it was a big influence and sort of proof of concept for the Tim Burton Batman movie.
Yeah.
That's why that movie was sort of allowed to be made the way it was because Dark Knight Returns was a very successful series.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that came out, and that sort of changed the face of Batman. And, come now, this year, and last year as well, DC has been putting out, over the course of a very long time, straight to DVD, small, like 70-minute long animated adaptations of famous comic book stories that they just sort of do with their own people. They're all produced by Bruce Timm, who's the guy who made all the DC animated series. He kind of left those projects that, like, universe ended for him to then, like, create these standalone movies. And the most recent projects that came out were The Dark Knight Returns, which was split into two versions, Part 1 and Part 2.
Yes. And it's a very, we'll get into the movie itself later, but it's a very clear Part 1, Part 2 split in, it's like, Kill Bill or Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where it's just, you get halfway through, it stops.
It's not like Lord of the Rings, where you have, like, this, like, full story or whatever. Yeah.
And I that's one thing that I would say right off the bat, is that if you want to watch these, just take 2 hours so you can watch them both at once.
Yeah, definitely. It's basically one movie.
If I had watched Part 1 back in September, I would have been so frustrated.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, that was half of a movie, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, so, yeah, and Dark Knight Returns was published as 4 issues originally, and when it was collected as a graphic novel, actually it's called Dark Knight Returns because that was just the title of, the first issue. Yeah. But yeah, no, as Sean explained it very well, very influential, very famous to this day, very revered. It always crops up, like when people make a list of the best Batman stories, this is always near the top.
Along with Year One.
Yeah. But, so that's kind of the history of it. And and obviously people were very excited for DC Animated Universe to do a movie version of it because people, I think, have wanted a movie of this book for a long time.
Yeah.
And DC Animated Universe has shown they can do really good work.
Yeah, definitely.
So, reason to be excited. But, before we talk about the movie itself, I think we need to talk about, sort of our personal history with the comics and our thoughts on it. Sean, sort of, what would you say about that? Like your view of Dark Knight Returns and your history with it?
I think, obviously, Dark Knight Returns came out before I was born, so
Right.
I wasn't around when that sort of changed how we look at Batman, so I don't have that perspective on it. I read it after it came up, like way after it came out, when I was just like getting a bunch of Batman comic, like graphic novel collections one day, and it's like, I haven't read this. Everyone says it's really great, and I need to read it. And I have to say, I think it's really okay. I don't think it. I mean, it's obviously really influential. I don't want to knock it down too much because it changed how a lot of people write Batman and think about Batman. But as its own thing, I think it has a lot of flaws. It is mired in really ham-fisted, really poorly done social commentary and satire that brings the story to a grinding halt. I really dislike its interpretation of Superman and sort of how that whole Batman-Superman stuff pans out. Just like it's completely contrary to how I feel about those characters. But I do think it has a lot of good stuff in it. I think its version of the Joker is really well done. I like sort of the really sort of like pulpy noir narration that just permeates it. That's sort of Frank Miller's, tradecraft is really just all in that pulpy noir narration that Batman does. And then I also think it has a really interesting pacing as a comic book that I really like, with how it lays out a lot of its panels, is that it will have like pages that are just packed with really small panels and that are really dense. And then in that sort of like, it takes you like minutes to get through those pages. It's almost like reading a novel because it's like the panels are so small. And then you'll just get a huge splash page with Batman doing something really awesome. And I think that pacing is really interesting and isn't usually done.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I think I read Dark Knight Returns. I specifically remember I read it in 10th grade of high school. And when I first read it, I was blown away by it. Like, I was really taken aback. I really liked it. And I was sort of at the same phase you were at, where I was just trying to read a lot of the famous comic books.
Yeah.
And I thought, I never for any time thought it was everything the hype had built it up to be, because nothing could be that. Quite frankly, the hype has always been a little over the top for it. But I really was blown away by it. I was really sort of drawn in by it. I really loved it. And I think over the years, the more I thought about it, the more I disliked the story, disliked the characters, disliked what it had to say about Batman and the world, and still found myself really enjoying the way the story was told. And I think that's basically what I come down to it on, is that I think The Dark Knight Returns is not a particularly good story, but it is told in an absolutely fascinating way.
Yeah, I agree.
The panel layout you just noted it's brilliant. It's really brilliantly done. The pacing of it is very good. The way that each of the issues really does function as kind of a standalone short story, but in a larger context, I think that works very well. I mean, I specifically remember I read it in 4 sittings, and I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
And, I think the artwork is absolutely phenomenal. It's a really, really fascinating version of Batman visually that I very much like. And again, I love their interpretation of the Joker. I love some of the things they say about other characters. But, like you said, I fucking detest its interpretation of Superman. In many ways, I don't like its interpretation of Batman either. But again, I think the way it's told is very interesting, and I think as a comic book, it is definitely, obviously it's worth reading because it's a piece of history that is essential to kind of understand the medium, and especially to understand Batman as he exists today. But I think this all informs sort of my view of the movie, which I think we can start talking about now.
Although I think before we start talking about the movie, I think we also have to talk about Frank Miller.
Okay,
I don't think you can talk about any Frank Miller project without talking about the man himself, because...
Yeah, Frank Miller is a fascinating guy, because while he is definitely influential, and I think he has written some great works, he is also insane.
Yeah,
and
that's an understatement.
I mean, I think you say this better than me, Sean, so I want you to explain. People like to gloss over certain things in The Dark Knight Returns and pretend certain things did not happen in that book, and pretend it's something that it isn't. And I think... Explain why The Dark Knight Returns is basically a defense of fascism, because that's what it is.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, what it is that it's about that what Batman is doing is actually the right thing. Where, for everyone else, comic books takes place in this fantasy world where we recognize that Batman is not, like, if Batman existed in the real world, what he's doing is fucked up. What he's doing is against any sort of reasonable legal system. I think anyone who's, a reasonable, knowledgeable person would recognize that you can't have a dude running around, beating people up, taking the law in his own hands, and, breaking people's bones, sending them to the hospital. A lot of these people are, mentally ill. You can't just have that happen. You can't have just a dude take the law into his own hands. That's really fucked up. But what The Dark Knight Returns does is that it does take that stance. It says, this is what the real world is like, and he uses this social satire to basically say that what Batman is doing is right, and it would be right in the world that we live in. And that's really what it feels like he's saying, is it's Batman should be going up and beating up these people. He should be beating up these 17-year-old kids who are living in these poor slums, break their bones, send them to the hospital, ruin their fucking lives because Batman has a chip on his shoulder because his parents were killed when he was a child.
Well, and that's sort of the broad strokes of the story. Yeah. But if we want to get into it further, I mean, Frank Miller is a super, super crazy right-wing dude.
Yeah,
definitely. And I don't say that saying all right-wing people are crazy. Yeah, I'm saying Frank Miller is crazy.
He's an extremist. He is a fascist.
Yes.
There's no other way to read his works.
No.
I feel.
And, that's one of the reasons, I'll just, quick digression here. That's one of the reasons why Sin City has always been his most creatively successful series, because it just takes place so far outside reality, he can indulge his own fetishes in a way that are more entertaining than they are when he tries to apply them to any sort of real-world context.
Yeah.
And Dark Knight Returns is full of this stuff, and it's always frustrating that people ignore this stuff, because people like to focus on, the great scenes with the Joker, the interesting interpretation of Two-Face, the, Batman-Superman fight, and completely ignore that the whole book is misogynistic in the extreme.
Yeah.
I mean...
And it is as good as, in that direction as Frank Miller has ever been. It's the least misogynistic work he's produced that I've read.
Probably, yeah. I mean... Sin City, every woman is a stripper. Here, every woman is fat and
Selena Kyle runs
a brothel.
Yeah, runs a brothel. She has become really fat and completely useless.
Yeah.
And this is the woman who used to be Catwoman, who could stand toe to toe with Batman, and now she can't do anything. She's completely useless.
Yeah. And it's homophobic in the extreme. There's this one character who is one of the news anchors who's a lesbian who's, I assume, he's trying to portray a lesbian by just having her have short hair, big boobs, and a shirt that says, I'm more than my boobs or something.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things like that are just anti-liberal sentiment saying, basically anyone who is progressive thinking in any kind of level is just stupid.
Yeah, and doesn't understand the way the world really works.
Right.
They've never been in the shit, man.
Yeah. That's the general tone of The Dark Knight Returns. And, I remember a couple of years ago, Frank Miller did some tweets or something, or a blog post about how much he hated Occupy Wall Street, how he viewed those people as terrorists and stuff. And people came out and were surprised by this. And it's like, what? Did you read The Dark Knight Returns?
Yeah, it's obviously those people never read his later works, because because the story with Frank Miller is that he wrote Batman The Dark Knight Returns. Everyone loved it. Then he got contracted to write Batman Year One. Everyone loves the shit out of that too. And then he did some other projects, and he mostly moved on to Sin City, which is his own thing. And once he went to Sin City, he never came back, because once he went to Sin City, every time he tried to write another project, the insanity was on the wall. Whereas before with Batman The Dark Knight Returns, it's all subtext. A lot of it's really ham-fisted subtext, but it's subtext. It's not like what the story's about. And then eventually, Frank Miller would come back to DC and write All-Star Batman and Robin, which is a story where Batman kidnaps Dick Grayson as Robin, locks him in the Batcave, makes him, basically forces him to eat, catch and eat rats, and just ruins Dick Grayson's life, all the while being just completely insane. And
killing cops.
Yeah, killing cops, and saying the most famous line, I think, that has ever been written in comic books, which is, "Are you dense? Are you retarded or something? I'm the goddamn Batman!" Which is not something that Batman would ever fucking say. He would never say he's the goddamn Batman and yell at this 12-year-old boy who he's just kidnapped.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, yeah, Frank Miller has not written really anything that I don't think that's that good since Sin City, and I don't even like Sin City that much. I don't even like his other stuff all that much. But.
Yeah. I am a big fan of Sin City, I'll confess that. I think that's Frank Miller at his best, because, again, it's not operating in any kind of real-world context, and it's just, they're very good modern noir Pulp Fiction stories. Mm-hmm. You can't view them as anything deeper than that, though, which is one of the good choices Robert Rodriguez made when he made Sin City, is he did not try to class it up or anything. And that I think he made Sin City in a way where he didn't have this baggage that he carried into it of, this is like a masterpiece. He just made a Sin City movie.
Yeah.
And that worked. And I do have to wonder if part of the issues with the Dark Knight Returns movies is that they do come in with this baggage of, this is a holy grail, we cannot touch it, and no one really put thought into what is this story necessarily saying and how do we represent that in the 21st century.
Yeah.
So should we talk about the movie now?
Yeah, I think we've covered all our bases with historical perspective.
So I kind of already gave it away. I am pretty negative on these two movies. I think there is a lot of good production elements to them. The animation is phenomenal. It looks theatrical in portions, and the style of it is great. It does not go for emulating what Frank Miller did artistically. It definitely has some elements there.
Yeah.
But it's really its own thing, which I think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, because Frank Miller's art style would look really weird in animated.
Right.
It's really unique and really sort of almost like scummy in a way.
Yeah. So it looks great. The production values are through the roof. It looks like they spent a ton of money on these for a home video production.
Yeah.
Voice acting, I think, is very good across the board. And we'll get to all those elements later. For me, I just think if I had to kind of sum up why I did not enjoy watching these movies, it's that I think because it is a cinematic adaptation that is pretty much slavish to the note of the comic book. It looks like they kind of just used the comic book as the script and storyboards. And I don't think, without substantial alterations, the comic book works in a cinematic context. And I certainly don't think it works in this context. And I think, basically, they also, because of the ways they make it a film, while they very much are trying to preserve the story and the dialogue, I think all the interesting stylistic things that Frank Miller did, that's all gone. Except for one thing, which is the TV stuff, which nobody has ever liked.
Yeah.
And so, to me, everything I like about The Dark Knight Returns is not in this movie, and everything I kind of am bothered by is what this movie is. And I think I can get much deeper into different issues here and there, but that's sort of overall how I view these. And I would have been more interested if they would have made these from the standpoint of, we don't have to treat this like we're adapting the Bible.
Yeah.
We're just going to make a movie that incorporates, some of the stuff from this book. That would have been more interesting to me, but I don't think that was ever going to happen. So. Mm-hmm. But what did you think, Sean?
For me, I basically have the same opinion as you. I don't think I'm quite as negative on it. I basically feel the same way about these animations more or less as I do about the graphic novel as a whole. I think it doesn't have the narration that the graphic novel has that's much more interesting, but then also, I don't know, the narration in itself has flaws, and that I recognize that it's, the book itself is so narration heavy that that'd be hard to adapt and bring into that. This is
something I just kind of hinted at, but let's mention that really quick for people who don't know. Mm-hmm. Dark Knight Rises has an internal monologue
by... Dark Knight Returns, you mean? This is going to be a problem. We should have stepped out in front of this before we started this. That, obviously, the conclusion to the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy came out very recently, called The Dark Knight Rises,
which I like much better than this.
Yeah, and we are talking about The Dark Knight Returns, the very famous Frank Miller story, and they are very similar titles. It's always fucking pissed me off that Christopher Nolan called that movie Dark Knight Rises, because I have been making that mistake since that title was announced. I'm always mixing up the titles for these two fucking things. So, if we ever say The Dark Knight Rises in this podcast, we mean The Dark Knight Returns.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And if we specifically start talking about The Dark Knight Rises, hopefully you'll know. We'll mention Tom Hardy or something.
Hopefully we won't start calling that The Dark Knight Returns and just get it all backwards.
Context matters here.
Yeah.
Anyway, Dark Knight Returns has an ongoing internal monologue by Batman, but most of the other major characters have internal monologues as well. Yeah. And actually one of the interesting stylistic things they do with that is each person's thought bubbles are a different color. Mm-hmm. So, I don't remember what Gordon's is. Maybe that's kind of brownish. But the notable one is the Joker's is bright green. And the Joker chapter to me is absolutely terrifying and fascinating because the Joker doesn't really speak except when he starts talking to Batman.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's very much he's just thinking things, and he's thinking the most fucked up shit because that's who the Joker would be. But it's a very calm, fucked up shit. He's all right, now I'm going to shoot this person. Now I need to kill these people. It's a really interesting version of the Joker.
Yeah.
And it's all internalized. And I agree with what you just said, that you could not obviously adapt all of that. There's too much narration for a film setting,
Yeah.
and there's probably too much narration in the book itself.
Yeah.
But they decided to drop all of it.
Mm-hmm.
There is not an ounce of narration in this movie, and to me, I don't necessarily need a Dark Knight Returns movie to be narration heavy. I don't need it to have the narration in it. But if you're going to adapt the story verbatim, 100%, note for note, panel for panel, and leave that out, you're leaving out an important part of that, and it makes the scenes where that was integral really, really clunky on screen.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the narration, that's fine. I understand that as a creative choice. You have to adapt the material to fit that, though.
Yeah,
because it was written with that narration in mind, and when it's gone, it's like, you can just, even if you didn't read the book, I think you could tell there's something missing there. Because when Batman gets to the Joker and decides he's going to snap his neck, you have no context for that.
Yeah.
And that's all internalized in the book. And so you just cut it out. That kind of comes the hell out of nowhere, because that's an extreme action. And it kind of fits with this interpretation of Batman, but even then, it's a little even more graphic than what we'd seen before.
Yeah.
So, but keep going with what you were saying.
Okay, yeah, so it cuts out the narration, and that sort of, like, takes out the only part of the original Dark Knight Returns that I really liked. But then also, I think the action scenes are really, really well done in this film, and that kind of carried me through it. It's just like, okay, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with him fighting the mutant. I'm looking forward to see what they do with the Joker scene. I'm looking forward to see what they do with the Superman fight scene. And so it's like, I enjoyed those scenes just as, like, animated action scenes, but, everything else, like the TV shit with the TV announcer stuff. I hated that so much in The Dark Knight Returns, and it's in this movie. And that's actually one of the interesting things, is that it just being a movie actually improves those sections, because you don't have to, because there's so much more effort in having to just, like, stop and read every fucking line of those TV fuckers saying whatever the fuck they're saying. And I can just kind of space out when they're doing it in the movie and be like, okay, I can pay attention now, because that shit's done with.
But yeah, I honestly thought the TV stuff annoyed me even more in here, because it's almost the opposite to me in the book, where it's like I can just skim through it in the book. Here it's like, all right.
No, it's like, for some reason, I like have this thing where it's like, when I'm reading it, I feel like I need to read all the dialogue, or else, like, who knows when they're going to say something important. They also have the benefit now of having, like, knowing the story that's like nothing important happens in those moments, so I don't need to pay attention at all.
I mean, honestly, I'm not joking when I say I think they could have done this as one 80-minute movie if they had just cut the fucking TV stuff out.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. Like, I'm saying they should have cut the TV shit out. Like,
because,
it still pisses me off.
Well, they did not.
But it pissed me off a lot in the graphic novel too. So it's like, I feel like the movie has all the shit with the graphic novels, but it has better action moments that, like, kind of makes up for not having the narration. So that's why I feel about the movie the same way I feel about the graphic novel. Like, I think
kind of all equals out.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's okay. Probably never going to watch it again, and I might read The Dark Knight Returns again at some point in the future, just because it's much more important in like historical context for comic books. But
yeah, well, I will never watch these movies again. I can say that right now, and I did not dislike them. I would say, because there are really interesting technical merits to them. As you said, I do think the action scenes are good. Mm-hmm. I did not enjoy the action enough for it to sort of carry me through it for me, I guess, and I think there's some inexplicable choices here in that they really do keep almost all the TV stuff intact. Yeah. And there are some parts of this movie where it's just 15 minutes of, all right, we're watching the news. And at one point, so it's like the news section started, and I thought, all right, well, I'm kind of hungry. I'm going to go grab some chips. So I stand up, and I'm like, I'm thirsty too. So I grab my glass, I get up off the couch, and I just let the movie play. And I walk over, and I get a drink, I get some chips, and I take my sweet time, because I'm hoping this will end. And I realize as I'm doing that, it feels like I'm just, like, in my house and just have the news on as white noise. Like, I realize, like, this is no different than if we just had the TV set to Channel 4 or something.
Yeah.
It's no different. And so, and I just kind of tune it out, come back, start eating my chips, wait for the goddamn news to end. I think I was mostly through my chips by the time that news section ended.
Yeah. No, the news stuff is rough. But, again,
it's rough in the book,
that shit is all in the... Like, I feel like... Like, I wish they had changed so much more, but it's like they couldn't. No. It's like I feel really bad for the production team, because I feel like a lot of those people were like, I don't want to put these news sections in here. But also you can't just... Like, I say that they're, like, useless, but you can't just cut them out wholesale, because a lot of like the sort of like just the basic narrative exposition happens in those sections too. So they have to like rewrite huge sections of the story that they probably didn't want to try to do because this is such a beloved story.
No, and I agree, and I mean my view is a flaw, no matter where it manifests itself.
Yeah.
But it is true; these are all holdover problems from the book I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And while I wish they had fixed them, I think I started this discussion even saying I knew they never would.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And again, I don't really blame the people who made it because they were probably on a mandate saying you don't change this shit.
Yeah, because there are a lot of people who really, really, really love this graphic novel, and I'm sure they would be really pissed if all of a sudden that new shit wasn't in there.
Yeah, and I think you talk about the people who made it. I have a lot of respect. I think for a lot of people in this production team. I think the director Jay Oliva. He got this gig because he did the storyboarding on Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. That gives me a lot of hope for Man of Steel because he's clearly good at what he does.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, the fight scenes in this are really good for what they can do in this format. And, I think he's got a great visual eye throughout. And I would like to see this guy direct something else where maybe he doesn't have to be this slavish to a source.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
So-
it's definitely, like, I do feel most of the flaws of the project just are carried over from the original source material in a really frustrating way.
Well, speaking of Carrie...
Yeah.
yeah.
That works. That's a segue.
One of the things that the movie makes abundantly clear to me, and again, this is a holdover issue, Carrie Kelly, the female Robin who's in this book, she is 100% unimportant to the story. You could just cut out every scene with her or her out of every scene. It wouldn't change the story at all. She's just kind of there. And yes, sometimes she helps Batman. Anyone can help Batman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I mean, they do try to, because with like part of the setup for The Dark Knight Returns is that they hint in dialogue that kind of like where this like universe sort of branches off from like the normal Batman stuff. It's just like it's all normal Batman stuff. It's like Dick Grayson is Robin, then Dick Grayson leaves to be Nightwing, and then Batman gets Jason Todd as the second Robin, and then what happens is that the Joker kills Jason Todd. And at that moment, that's when Batman more or less decides to retire in this universe. And it's like that kind of breaks him. He does, Tim Drake never becomes Robin in this version of the story, whereas in the normal DC universe he does. And so I think, they have this whole thing where he's got he has Jason Todd's uniform in like this memorial in the Batcave, and then like Bruce is staring at it. And he's like, "Never again." And then 30 minutes later, he's picking up this 14-year-old girl who is dressed in a Robin uniform and adopts her as Robin. And they're kind of trying to say that it's he needs Robin, and Robin is what makes him Batman again in a way. But it's also kind of really fucked up because they don't do that enough, because Carrie Kelly is not the focus at any point in any of the stories. It's always Batman, Batman, Batman. When honestly, if I were adapting the source material to make it more interesting, I would have done it from Carrie Kelly's perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
I would have followed Carrie Kelly through, basically cut out the first two stories more or less. Other than you can't cut out the mutant stuff, but it's have Batman introduced through Carrie.
Yeah,
but
I agree, and I think what I got out of it when I read the book was that Carrie sort of, because she was someone who was like him, trying to take on social responsibilities or whatever, that he was kind of inspired by that, and that's part of what emboldens him to come back full time.
Yeah.
And I think the movie it really glosses over all the stuff with Carrie, and I don't know if it necessarily does anything less than the graphic novel does, but maybe just because of the way it's paced, it kind of feels like we see her in one scene where she's rescued, and then next scene she's somehow become a superhero.
The next scene she's trying on a Robin uniform, and then she's jumping across buildings and stuff. Yeah. I mean, that's basically how, as far as I recall, it happens with the graphic novel. There's definitely no big scene they cut out between it, with Carrie.
It's just a general sort of tonal thing I got.
Yeah, it is definitely, because it's a lot weirder seeing it animated of her all of a sudden jumping from rooftop to rooftop and beating up armed thugs when she hasn't had any training from Batman yet. Yeah, I agree. That's something about it being animated makes that stick out a lot more than it did when it's just a panel.
Yeah, and, that being said, I want to say the actress who plays Carrie is Ariel Winter, who is on TV's Modern Family, I believe. I liked her a lot as Carrie Kelly.
Yeah.
And, you had your idea about, doing it from her perspective. I would love to see that, partially because I think they found a really good voice actress for her.
I agree, yeah.
So,
but she's mostly a useless character. She's a plot device to, get Bruce really back into the game, and then she's like off fucking like shit on her own. Like,
which is why before we get letters about this, because I know we're going to get letters about this, that is why Carrie Kelly does not dispel misogyny in The Dark Knight Returns.
Oh yeah,
people have tried to claim that before.
Oh god,
no, she's nothing. She's like that's just in the book. She's so little to the book. You cannot use that as a shield.
Yeah, no, I agree. That I don't think she's not some sort of like feminist statement from Frank Miller or something like that.
Those words should not be able to say those in this universe. Like the words
feminist statement from Frank Miller.
Your mouth should just like conglomerate close. Like stop until you think something else.
If there's one person on this earth that is not a feminist, it's fucking Frank Miller.
Yeah. So, in any case. I think that's as good a chance as any to maybe talk about some of the performances in this movie.
Yeah.
Focus on, because I think they're mostly good. So we like Ariel Winters, Carrie Kelly. Peter Weller is Batman in this movie,
yes,
Bruce
Robocop.
Wayne. Which was, I remember the news of that was a pretty big land for them. Because Peter Weller, he's a damn good actor.
Yeah.
He's RoboCop, and he's sort of the right vein of actor you want to play Bruce Wayne in this.
Yeah.
I know the always the sort of famous thing people wanted Clint Eastwood to play this part. That was never going to happen.
Yeah,
but
I can see why, because Batman says punk a whole lot in this movie.
Right. And if they had done a live action Dark Knight Returns in the 90s, Clint Eastwood should have done it.
Yeah.
But I think Peter Weller is a good replacement. But what did you think of Peter Weller in this movie? His performance, his voice, all that.
I really liked it. It's I think it's a good voice. I don't like his performance. That wasn't like really great, but also. They cut, because all the good stuff that you could have done as Batman is all his internal monologue in the book, because it's all like millions of ellipses all over the place, and it's like really like cryptic, like dark bullshit that he says all the time. But I think Peter Weller sort of like captures the nonchalant badassness that Frank Miller puts in his version of Batman.
Yeah.
Where it's like this Batman Batman still gets beat up, but Batman always comes out on top. Through some convoluted bullshit, like in the Superman fight, and I think Peter Weller sort of captures that confidence that this version of Batman ends up having, but also the sort of really world weary.
I agree. I think his voice is very good for it. I think almost perfect. Like just the tone of the voice, the pitch of the voice, it sort of feels very natural with this Batman. I'm less sold on the performance. I thought it was good, but never great. I mean, you said it was good, never great.
Yeah,
but there were parts where I also
phenomenal or anything.
There are also parts where I felt he was really kind of phoning it in, and particularly, I just thought in some cases his emphasis was wrong. Particularly whenever he started throwing around militaristic terms, I didn't quite buy this version of Batman because, when he was calling people soldier and again laying out militaristic terms like that. I feel like his voice should have gotten a little more intense, and Peter Weller mostly stays laid back for all that.
He's not ever particularly intense.
Yeah. And I also thought, the speech in Part 2 to the mutants that he gives.
Yeah, no, I agree. That part was not a particularly great performance.
No, but overall, I mean, a good voice for it. Yeah, and I think they had to get someone other than Kevin Conroy for this one, because
I agree.
I would scar me if I heard Kevin Conroy's Batman in this context, because those are two completely different. Those are two completely different characters. They share nothing in common, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things is in the Batman animated series, in the 4th season, there's that episode, I think it's called Legends of the Dark Knight, where it's they do a bunch of scenes from different eras of Batman, and one of them is this. They do the mutant scene with Batman fighting the mutants and whatever, and in that scene, it's Michael Ironside doing the voice of that Batman. And it's I always kind of was hoping that Michael Ironside would be brought into this project too, because it's a fucking great voice for that Batman. But Peter Weller sort of captures it. It's not quite as hard edged as Michael Ironside was, but if you want to see another voice performance of this Batman, go watch that episode, because he does the whole thing where it's this isn't a mud hole, this is an operating table, and I'm the surgeon, and he breaks his arm. That seems awesome in that episode.
I actually think if you buy The Dark Knight Rises Part 2 on DVD or Blu-ray, they have that episode on there.
That'd be cool. That's a really good episode.
It's great. And if you own Batman Gotham Knight, which is one of the earlier DC animated universe
do basically a remake of it.
They do a remake of it, and it's on disc too.
Oh, do they? I didn't know that.
That's actually where I saw that episode the first time. Those were actually the first episodes of the Batman animated series I saw.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
This is a complete tangent, but in that episode, I love the whole golden age, it's more Silver Age story Batman with Batman and Dick Grayson fighting the Joker, and they're in this place that has huge instruments and running on a piano, and then the Joker has this great thing where it's he picks up this violin and plucks a string and goes, "Mother always said I had talent." I don't know. I love that episode so much.
It's a great episode.
Yeah. If you want to just like, it's just this great overview of like the different eras of Batman, just all encapsulated in this 130-minute cartoon.
Yeah.
If like fans of Batman have not watched that episode, definitely pick it up because it's great.
Yeah. Or just buy the Batman complete animated series and watch it start to finish because it's brilliant. It's so good. We have to talk about that on the podcast sometime.
Yeah.
Anyway, obviously probably one of the most famous parts of the animated series is Mark Hamill's Joker. So here, we have Michael Emerson doing the Joker. That's another one where you had to get someone else, obviously.
Yeah.
It's a very different Joker. I liked Michael Emerson's Joker.
I did too, but there's not a whole lot for the Joker to say, really.
No. And that's too bad because what I heard from him, I was like, if he was doing the internal monologuing, that would sound great with this voice.
Yeah.
Michael Emerson, if you don't know, was Benjamin Linus on Lost, probably my favorite character on Lost.
Yeah.
And very, very fitting voice for this Joker. It's just this Joker is kind of cut to the bare minimum. So
yeah, because again, they cut out all of his internal narration, and that's like basically everything he would have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think those are mostly the notable voices. I mean, I honestly don't know who played Gordon in this. I'll have to look it up. I thought he was fine.
Yeah, I agree.
But not great. And that's kind of where I come down on most of the voices in this movie, is that they're all competent, but a lot of them are sort of forgettable.
Yeah, there's no real standout performances from the cast anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Conan O'Brien has a weird cameo that I had to sort of do a double take as where he's playing this news host that gets killed by the Joker. I was like, is that Conan O'Brien? Why? What? Okay, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. Mark Valley plays Superman.
He does a good job.
He's fine, yeah.
He's a very Tim Daly-ish Superman voice.
Yes. Mark Valley, who actually looks a little like Superman if you look at him here. He's very much got the Superman kind of face.
Yeah.
Anyway, but and other than that, I mean, I'm just looking at the cast list. Not a whole lot. David Selby was Commissioner Gordon, I guess. I don't really know who that is. But, they were all fine. No one I really disliked, although one thing I think we got to talk about in terms of making The Dark Knight Returns in the year 2013 is the mutants are a huge part of this film. And if you don't know, the mutants in the story are this gang that have cropped up. They're one of the main reasons Batman comes back into action. And they're a very 80s. You cannot get more 80s.
Yeah, it is the most we wrote this story in the 80s, and this is what the future is going to be like, and it's all going to be punks with these dumb fucking clothes and earrings and spiky nipple things and Cyclops visors, and they're going to just talk in this really. It's almost like Frank Miller read A Clockwork Orange and was it's cool they have this fakey slang stuff. I'm going to try to do that, and then it's just dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can you find an excerpt in there?
Sure. I'm actually around the part where my two favorite characters in the whole thing is Rob and Don, who wear shirts that say "My name is Rob" and "My name is Don." I feel that has to be I've been racking my head for so long because I forgot that those characters were in the book about who that might be. It has to be a reference to someone. I can't think of who it would be. But let's see. So this is a scene where Carrie Kelly is trying to infiltrate the mutants and to sort of persuade them, and she stumbles upon Rob and Don. And leader don't shiv on Batman. Leader say he pegged Batman. Leader say, but leader chill in a cell, Don. And Batman, he nuke half the gang. Radical. Hey, eyes slideways, Don. Chicken leg coming, wearing colors. My mom licking Chegs. All lines are busy. Chegs kinda my nasty, Rob. Cheg Billy. Cheg's preschool mutant. Leader take you face if touching me, Spud. And that's sort of, it goes on like that, where they're just talking dumb nonsense with Shiv and Spud.
There's one scene in part 1, I believe, where they do an unabridged just reading of an entire scene, the one Sean's reading, in fact.
Yeah, it's this whole scene.
It's 7 minutes long. It is terrible, but it is fucking hilarious.
Yeah, because you're just what the fuck are these people saying? You have no... Because the thing with... The big difference is that in Clockwork Orange, all the slang is actually based on Russian, and it's and they make effort for you to kind of be able to understand it through, the context. And this is just they just call people Spud in any given situation. You have no idea why. They just, call people chicken legs and say, look at stuff sideways. No idea what they mean by shiv. They just use these random words in any given context, and you have no way of okay, so that's what that means.
Yeah, it's awful writing, and it's hilarious to see it done with this modern animation style in a modern movie.
And just have people saying it, like, it's like the huge part of it, where it's like, when you're just reading it, you're kind of like, whatever, this is all bullshit. But then when someone's, like, trying to, like, perform it, it's like, that's all bullshit.
Yeah.
You're saying nothing right now.
So, that's one reason to watch the Dark Knight Returns movies.
Yeah, is to hear that dialogue, like, dramatically performed by actual voice actors.
Yeah. So, there's just a lot of weird stuff like that because they just changed nothing in the movies, it really does not translate particularly well. But it translates humorously.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what else is there to talk about here? How do you feel obviously the famous part of The Dark Knight Returns is Chapter 4, which is his fight with Superman.
Yes, you can never get away from the who would win the fight Batman-Superman arguments.
Now, I think this is before we talk about how the movie does it. I think the movie does it pretty well.
Yeah, definitely. As far as like adapting the fight as it's written, I think it's really like sort of spectacular visually.
It is. And I actually don't know if there's much more to say about it beyond that. I just think we need to talk about this part of the story.
Yeah.
Because we've been using the word bullshit a lot here. This is bullshit.
Yes, the Superman-Batman thing, I think, has always been fucking bullshit.
Explain.
So basically, this is the thing with Frank Miller. This is the thing with a lot of fucking DC writers that I really hate. Is that they are Batman writers. Everybody fucking loves the shit out of Batman because Batman's not a hero. He's not a superhero. He doesn't have superpowers. He's just a dude with billions of dollars and an unbelievable IQ and like this unbelievable physical prowess that no normal human could possibly ever achieve. But he's just like you and me, man. And so people always try to get on Batman like that because Batman's so goddamn cool. And I have been in so many fucking arguments throughout the entire course of my life with assholes over who would win the fight, Batman or Superman. And anyone who is fucking sane, it says Superman! Because he's Superman! Dude moves fucking planets! I have seen panels of Superman carrying a galaxy on a fucking chain he found in space. He can shoot lasers from his eyes. He can move near the speed of light. He's practically invulnerable. Batman has died, Superman has died, and they brought him back. You can't use arguments about, the Superman got beaten by Doomsday, so that means he can be defeated. It's fucking dumb. Superman is fucking Superman. And as far as Batman is not just a dude, Batman's a genius. Batman has access to, basically unlimited amount of money. He's a fucking ninja. Batman cannot touch Superman. If you're saying Batman and Superman are seriously going to get in a fight, Superman could drop the Earth on Batman. He could push Batman into the center of the Earth. He could throw Batman into the sun. He could just fucking lobotomize Batman with his heat vision. Superman would win in a fight against Batman, hands down. There is no argument contrary as far as I'm concerned. But everyone loves Batman, and since Batman obviously would lose the fight, everyone wants to say that Batman would win the fight. And this is the first example of Batman versus Superman in Chapter 4 of The Dark Knight Returns, is that basically Superman, they kind of, give some bullshit to it that Superman has just taken a nuke. And Superman could take a nuke fine. There's this whole weird section where he's, gets hit by the nuke, and, because they're launching a nuke at Earth, and he's like, I need to, or at America, and he's like, I need to save America. So he takes the nuke, and he's all sort of, shriveled up, and then he lands, and then he, absorbs the life from the plants around him. That's, and that's in the comic book. It's, I'd forgotten about that. It's, it's also really weird just to see animated, because it's, he's sort of Superman just gets all this power from the sun. He can't just absorb life from the plants. But that happens, and then he has to go fight Batman to sort of take him into custody. And Superman allows Batman to sort of set the time and place. And then out of his ass, Batman just pulls this super outfit, this robot mech suit he can get into that apparently will put him on fighting terms with Superman. He's he obviously gets Green Arrow, has a kryptonite arrow that he shoots at Superman. And they just want to put Batman on an even level with Superman and have him fight him, even though that fucking doesn't work. For anyone who knows anything about Superman, you're just looking at it and it's that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. Batman would be crushed in this fight. I don't care what suit he has. I don't care if Superman just took a nuke. I don't even care if he got shot with a kryptonite arrow. Superman could still run away if, the kryptonite's not on him constantly. It's just dumb. And it's always something that sort of gets on my nerves, is this very fanboyish behavior that is like is like everyone has this like viewpoint that Batman should win in the fight, but then when writers do it, it really gets on my nerves. And this is the first example that sort of set this precedent that Batman always wins in the fight against Superman. But they always have this out where he doesn't really, like in this, Batman basically beats up Superman, where Superman barely even fights back until Batman fakes his own death on top of Superman. It's like, you didn't win that fight, Batman. But everyone's like, yo, Batman can beat Superman. It's fucking Dark Knight Returns. Look at that. It's like, no, he fucking punched Superman with a robotic fist for like 5 minutes until Batman collapsed on top of him, and then Superman's like, well, shit.
Yeah, and Superman doesn't fight back because he knows he could snap this mortal like a twig.
Exactly. Superman would fucking win. And it's like...
And I think we have to talk about... This feeds into Frank Miller's view of Superman, which is... I think he views Superman as, you know, the liberal who shouldn't be tolerated in this world.
Yeah, in a really weird way where Superman, like, becomes a government lackey. And this is also something... This is actually something that a lot of Superman writers do, but it's something that I think is just dumb holdover from the very early, like, Golden Age era Superman, of this concept that Superman is somehow, you know, truth, justice, and the American way. Superman does not have American interests at heart. Superman fights for humanity. Superman's not an American. He was raised in America, but once he like realizes he's a Kryptonian and he's fucking Superman, Superman doesn't care about like country lines. He doesn't give a shit about that kind of stuff. And so having him work for the American government and basically fighting the Cold War for them is one, just taking Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen.
Yeah, it's plagiarism.
Yeah, it's straight up just that whole scenario. But then it also just doesn't sit right with who Superman is. Like, Superman would never do that. Superman would never be fighting a war. He wouldn't be, like, going and acting American imperialism in some, like, dumb little, like, off-coast country or whatever. I don't understand where Frank Miller got that interpretation of Superman, but it always sort of gets on my nerves because it's, I don't know. It's very degrading to the character, I feel.
It is, and I think what's so weird to me is he views Superman in this story the way most writers view Batman. Where most writers, if they're going to do Batman in a real-world context, will examine, like Christopher Nolan does in his movies, the ways in which Batman, the pros and cons of Batman.
Yeah.
That, you know, Batman, yes, he can do some good, there's no doubt about that, but there's also a downside to that. Mm-hmm. And in this, it's like, well, Superman can do some good, but obviously he's a bad guy. But Batman, because he doesn't follow any rules, he's the hero. Mm-hmm. And it's this weird... They really manipulate Superman so much in this story just to get him to the point where, you know, Batman can make him look like a pussy.
Yeah.
But really, it's just Superman knowing, you know, I'm not going to punch this old man. I mean, what am I, a monster?
Yeah. And it's like, and I think the thing that bugs me so much about like when they do this is that it just feels like fan fiction to me. Like that's the same feeling I get. It's just like you just like Batman so much. You've just turned Batman into this dumb like Mary Sue character who can just do anything just for the sake of being like, look how cool Batman is. And it's just like, and that makes Batman lame to me. I don't want to see Batman being able to beat up Superman. That's dumb. If Batman was going to get into a fight with Superman, Batman would never do that, because Batman would know he'd fucking lose. Batman would never put himself in that situation. They'd be going toe-to-toe with fucking Clark Kent. Like, that's dumb.
That being said, you know, all of this, that's still my favorite part of this movie.
Yeah, no, I agree, because the fight's fucking cool. Like, if you put all of your, like, how dumb it is aside, the fight's still cool. And it's like, and there is still a part of you deep inside that is like, fuck yeah, Batman, whenever Batman does something cool. And it's like, it still hits that. But, like, the smart part of you still goes, oh, this is fucking stupid.
Yeah.
This doesn't fit with the character. This, like, ruins Superman as a character. This makes Batman come, like, not interesting anymore because they just turn Batman into Superman. Because they just give him, it's like, you are in this robot suit so you can, like, do whatever. You can, like, take a steel beam to the face because you're in a robot suit.
Yeah. No, and it's this... The one thing I really like about how they pace this section of the movie, though, is I kind of like the idea that it's almost like... The way they present it in the movie, at least, it's very much Batman just feeling like, I'm at my rope's end, this is it, I'm putting it all on the line here, I'm gonna fucking fight Superman because I can, because I will. And they just kind of, they present that well, and Peter Weller does the voice acting in this section, I think, pretty strongly. But yes, logic kicks in at a certain point, and you're like,
it's fucking Superman! You can't beat Superman! It's just dumb.
Yeah. So, Zack Snyder, if you're listening... Understand, Superman's a god. Treat him like one.
Like that's part of the point of Superman is that Superman already has like this like infinite, practically amount of power, and it's like that can be very interesting. A lot of people have this feeling that's like that Superman is therefore like not relatable, or he has like no problems because of that. It's like that can be very interesting stories looking at this guy who has this much power and trying to figure out what do you do when you have that much power. That's a good story.
Yeah, Superman stories that focus on the choices Superman has to make are fascinating stories. So anyway, I see how you're just flipping pages, and every other one, TV scenes.
Oh, yeah. No,
Sean's flipping through the graphic novel. It's just TVs everywhere.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the fucking book. Anyway, what else is there to say about these movies? I mean, I was disappointed by them. You were kind of disappointed by them.
I wouldn't say I was disappointed. This is mostly what I was expecting it was going to be like. I should also say I have seen a lot of the DC animated movies, and this is sort of what it is. I wouldn't say this is like the worst one I've ever seen, but this is like in like the category of like the bad ones that it's like I'm never going to watch again.
Yeah,
but it's like, and that's it. You know, not a lot of them are not particularly phenomenal. A lot of them are sort of like I'm going to watch this once. I'm going to enjoy this. And a lot of them are also nice because they're also stories that I haven't read before. And like, I think you'd probably actually enjoy this a lot more if you hadn't read The Dark Knight Returns, because it's like there would be a lot more of like what's going to happen next that would kick in for you where it wouldn't for us.
Yeah. But you know, I think we're pretty much done talking about these movies. So I think this is an interesting question. Yeah. You've seen most of the DC Animated Universe movies, or a lot of them. Which ones, you know, from this, you know, let's just keep it to like 2005 on, you know, this sort of era.
Yeah.
Which ones would you recommend as being definitely worth watching, ones that you would watch multiple times, that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. This is going to be a hard one to just like remember because there's so many. I mean, the one that stands out to me immediately is Batman Under the Red Hood, which is an adaptation of the Batman the Red Hood storyline that deals with the Red Hood, Jason Todd, and I think that story is really well done. I think it's a perfect example of a comic book story adapted into animated format and not being slavish to the original material, because I like the version of Batman Under the Red Hood better than its comic book version. I think the animated movie is far superior. The biggest thing about Batman Under the Red Hood that it improves is that, like, this isn't fucking a spoiler because everybody knows this. It's Jason Todd comes back to life and he's a villain. Like, that's happened fucking years and years ago. Everyone knew it was going to happen. But what happens in the comic books is the explanation for Jason Todd coming back is that it's supposed to be a tie-in for, it's one of their huge Crisis crossover events, it's like Final Crisis or like Infinite Crisis, one of those. And it's basically Superboy Prime is in the multiverse and he punches the wall of reality that like cracks throughout reality, and that ends up bringing Jason Todd back to life. And like a whole bunch of stories tied into that moment. I'm not going to explain that sentence anymore because there's no way you can explain dumb DC stuff. But since Batman Under the Red Hood, the DVD movie, is not tied into like proper DC continuity at the time, they're just able to use the Lazarus Pits. And it's like, that's how Jason Todd comes back to life. It's like, yes, that makes sense. Fucking Lazarus Pits, that's like an established Batman thing. But unfortunately, in like the original story, because of other shit, like Lazarus Pit was not an available option. So I think Under the Red Hood is a really good one. That's like one I definitely watch. And then we have a list of all the other ones here right now. Justice League Crisis on Two Earths is another really good one, especially if you're a fan of the old Justice League cartoons, because it has like Kevin Conroy's Batman. I think it's Tim Daly's Superman or George Newbern's Superman, but they have most of the voice cast from that series coming back for Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, and that's a really fun one. All-Star Superman is another good one, although I would recommend that for only people who have read the story, because All-Star Superman is a really, really long graphic novel, and they cut out most of it because you can't bring in most of the stories for that one. Let's see, Batman Gotham Knight that we mentioned earlier, that's a compilation of Batman stories set in the Christopher Nolan universe. That one's okay.
I like that one a lot.
It's got, like, some of the stories are really good and some of them are okay.
Yeah, it's an anthology film. Yeah. That's just how they shake out. Mm-hmm. But I think it's worth watching. It's absolutely worth watching because it's fascinating to see these different filmmakers just put their stamp on Batman and do, like, all these different interpretations in one go, while all kind of under the Christopher Nolan sort of umbrella. I think it's very fascinating on that level. I think if I watched it again, I would sort of cherry pick the ones I liked the most. But
yeah, no,
the one of Deadshot is fantastic.
Yeah, I remember that one because they kind of deal a lot with Batman's thing with guns in that one in a really interesting way. And then the other one from this list that I think is also really, really well done, is definitely worth a watch, is the Wonder Woman movie. If you're like anyone who has any interest in Wonder Woman at all, I think it's a really good version of that character. It's sort of her origin story about her coming over to America. She like meets Stephen Trevor and all that stuff. And Stephen Trevor is voiced by Nathan Fillion.
Oh,
he
nice.
does a really great job in that one. But there are other ones too that are good, but and if you're a big fan of DC Comics, I would just say watch all of them. You know, you can just like rent them. You can find them in like various like Amazon Instant Video or on iTunes, and I'd say give them a watch if you really like DC Comics. But the ones I mentioned earlier are definitely the best ones. Yeah. There's also another one, Superman, Batman, Apocalypse. That one's also really fun. It's like Superman, Batman team up, and they go to Apocalypse and fight Darkseid. Supergirl's in it.
It's got Summer Glau as Supergirl. That's
yeah,
awesome.
that's right. I was trying to remember. They've had like a lot of them have members from Firefly in it. I think their interpretation of the Death of Superman story has Jane, Adam Baldwin. He voices
nice.
Superman. That one, he does a pretty good job there.
Now
yeah.
I just want to look at pictures of Summer Glau.
Okay, you can do that after we finish the podcast.
Okay.
Now. But yeah, I think like I really love the DC animated films that they come out with, even when they're not necessarily great movies. I think they're always fun to watch. Like the only one that I was kind of bored by was their Batman Year One, but that was also very similar to this movie in that they were fucking slavish to that book, and I also think that like actual graphic novel is mostly okay. I don't think it's like really phenomenal Batman story.
That's one where you can very clearly see, though, it had this influence, and then other people built on it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's definitely one where I think if you had the perspective when it came out, it would seem much better to you. Yeah. But like having seen much better Batman stories done since that came out,
well, just watch Batman Begins. I mean, it's like
exactly. Yeah. Like Batman Begins is a much better version of basically that story.
Yeah,
yeah.
So, but the best animated movie that has something to do with DC, ever. And whenever we talk DC and animation, we have to mention this because it's great and not enough people have seen it, is Batman, Mask of the Motherfucking Phantasm.
Yes, that is the full title. It's Batman, Mask of the Motherfucking Phantasm.
Yes.
Definitely.
Buy this movie. Find it.
Yeah.
Find it somewhere. If it's out of print, pirate it. Just watch it. It's so good.
Yeah, no, Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, because you very specifically said of the modern DC animated movies that like sort of cut that one out of it. But yeah, no, that one's the best of the lot. It's like a very different thing because it's all tied into the Batman the Animated Series. It has like all the people behind that series made that movie. All the cast is there. The Mask of the Phantasm is my favorite Batman movie. I think it's phenomenal.
It is a great movie.
Yeah,
and you don't need to qualify it any further than that by saying animation or anything else. It's got I mean, it's got the best Joker material you will find in a Batman movie.
The Joker stuff in that movie is great.
It is amazing. It's stuff dealing with the origin, because the series never did any origin stuff with Batman beyond some dialogues. Mm-hmm. But this actually kind of delves into it.
It does different stuff with it. Right. That's my favorite part, is that it brings in this new female character who's sort of around when Bruce is like kind of college age and sort of like dealing with how like kind of trying to figure out whether or not he's going to become Batman, and like sort of gives him an out. It's like he has this opportunity to go for another life, and that like introducing that character that's like brand new to that movie is great. Yeah. It adds so much interesting new material, and that's one of the big risks with superhero stuff. Whenever you do sort of origin era stuff, is that it's like, okay, I know what happens. Bruce's parents get killed. He goes wanders the world and trains. Like, I've seen this done over and over again. Mask of the Phantasm does different stuff, and it focuses on a different part in his life for the origin, and not just him being a kid.
Right. Yeah. And I think it presents the Joker in a way you've never seen him before. He's honestly terrifying on a Heath Ledger level in that film.
He's fucking scary.
Yeah, I mean, that to me cements why Mark Hamill is my favorite Joker, and always will be.
Yeah.
Because he's fucking Mark Hamill as the Joker. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. And the animation in that movie's great. It's also just an 80-minute movie, but it feels fucking epic.
It feels like a long, like fully satisfying movie.
Oh, and when you get to the end of it, you feel battered. Like, you can't do anything after you watch that movie. It's just like, well, fuck, I'm just beat.
Yeah, it's like I can't do anything else today because that was my day, was watching this 80-minute movie. Yeah, it's this really fulfilling experience.
I mean, you kind of feel what it's like to be Batman in the scenario where you're done. It's like, how does he pick himself up and go on?
It kind of reminds me of playing like the Arkham games, where it's like by the time you're at the end, and it's like Batman's all fucked up, like his suit's torn up, his eyes are just bloodshot, he's got like scars and shit. It's like, Fuck, man.
Take a nap.
Yeah, we went through some shit, dude.
But yeah, and speaking of Mark Hamill and the Joker, the number one animated movie I want to see DCAU make now is I want them to do a Killing Joke movie.
I agree.
Because that's actually a special case where the Killing Joke is so short that I think they could do their slavish, just do their book, and it would work fine.
Yeah.
If they got Mark Hamill as the Joker.
And Mark Hamill has said multiple times that he would be willing to come back to the role if they decided to make a Killing Joke movie.
Yeah, and I think if you do that, you also want Kevin Conroy on the other side.
Yeah, definitely.
And if they do that, I would love to see it. If they don't have those guys, I don't know if I care, but it's like...
Yeah, but that specifically would be awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And, it would be really cool. And maybe they could even get Brian Boland on board, who is the illustrator, to do some art design for it, because that's one of the most visually interesting Batman stories. Mm-hmm. And that's honestly very, very influential too. Like Tim Burton always talked about that. That's the one more than anything else that inspired his Batman movie.
Yeah,
and you can see that in how his Jack Nicholson Joker kind of shakes out. So anyway, I think that's all there is to say on this topic.
Yeah.
So Dark Knight Returns Parts 1 and 2. If you really love the shit out of this book, it comes recommended.
Yeah. If you're, just again, we are not the biggest fans of the original graphic novel. So, but if you are, definitely pick this up.
Yeah, it's good, clean, fascist fun for the whole family.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not bothered by the social commentary and the dumb satire and the one dude, my favorite part of the whole thing, where when I remember reading the original graphic novel, it just clicked of oh God, this is in this book, is that it's one of the TV sections where they're just interviewing people, and they just interview this one, really, cliche, liberal, lefty type dude, and about, the gang violence, and he's just going on and on about how it's no, Batman's not okay, he's a fascist, he shouldn't be hurting this people, this is he's putting these people into hospitals, and this is not what the law is about, and he's what? No, I've never lived in the city before. It's yes, because everyone who has that opinion obviously has no idea what they're talking about. Of course, Frank Miller. For fuck's sake.
Oh, that's Frank Miller.
Yeah, it's just really, really insulting social satire where it's man, that's...
He stacks the deck.
Yeah, no, he definitely stacks the deck.
So, next week, we will talk about something.
Yeah, but what the fuck are we going to talk about?
I think we have a really, really fun topic in mind for next week, because there's nothing going on.
Yeah.
So we're just we have an idea that's just goofy, silly, and stupid.
Yeah.
But it's fun.
The emphasis on the stupid, I should say. Yeah.
So that'll be that. We'll have other things to talk about as time goes on.
Yeah, hopefully.
And if all else fails, we'll just turn this into the Persona podcast.
Yeah, I mean, that is always an option. That is always in our back pocket. It's just fuck it, let's just talk about Persona today.
Yeah. Or Doctor Who.
Yeah, it's now we've got two.
Yeah,
now we've got two things. We should just do a Doctor Who and Persona podcast. This is 1 week we do Doctor Who, next week we do Persona. Just flip between them.
That sounds like a good life.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it does.